How are you?
Doing
It's
well.
been a
How are
while.
you?
I'm doing fabulously. Oh, you're so wrong. I should bully you.
Well, you can try, as you
Okay.
usually do.
Okay, I'm gonna bully you. So here's my bully. Um, okay, this is just correct. Like, I disagree with him, but his argument has not been grappled with, like at all, either by you or by Steven. And it's incredibly frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, his argument is just that, like, essentially, you can have a league designed in any way you want. And so his question is basically, we used to design leagues based on black people having a league and white people having a league. And that had different outcomes in terms of who got playing time, who got time on television, all of that stuff, than the leagues that we have today. And so if you look at, like, the people who were successful prior to having these different leagues, they are different people. There was a larger proportion in, say, football or in basketball of white players who were getting a lot of time and a lot of attention than there are today. And I don't think that means that, like, it's a failure that we've had integration, right?
Right.
Okay, so then why is it a failure of integration if by having a single league, both for men and women, men are no longer at the highest level of gymnastics?
Wait, what?
Women are better at gymnastics. There are whole events that men don't do in gymnastics. Why is it a failure of, like, gymnastics or a failure of the league system if by integrating between men and women, men no longer compete at the highest level?
Well, they made a men's league for that.
Right, but why is it a problem if we no longer have a men's league in the same way that we no longer have a white league?
Because I don't think that there's as big of a difference, biologically speaking, between black men and white men as there are between men and women.
Well, if we look at the fastest runners in, like, certain track and field events are almost universally like they're from the Horn of Africa, right? Almost all of them. Not only are they black, but they're from a particular region of Africa, right? So, like, I would say that means that there is like, I'm Jewish, right? And I'm a European Jew by descent. So, like, I will not have the same ability to run as fast as those people from the Horn of Africa. Does that mean that, like, we should make a Jewish league that gets the same amount of viewership, that gets the same amount of attention as the actual league of the best and fastest runners? Probably not, right?
Well, it depends. So if we're talking about, like, a national league, then it's not going to matter as much. Over time, their genetics will equal out to ours. If we're talking about the Olympics, then, like, no, like, that's kind of the point in the Olympics, is to see the differences between this nation and that nation in the way that they compete and the levels that they're competing at. So that's
not my point.
Well,
my point is, like,
your point?
even among people who are representing the United States, there's still people who are the descendants of people from the Horn of Africa. There is something biological going on, and I won't pretend to understand it. And I don't think that you can pretend to understand it. I don't think that Steven or Sinthe can pretend to understand it. But there is something biological going on that is the reason that people from a specific region of the world seem to be faster than, particularly at sprints, than elsewhere.
From what I understand, it is explained, and that it's the altitude at which they live at that makes it easier for them to breathe. And then when they're breathing at this altitude, it makes it, like, to where their lungs have already adjusted to areas where it's harder to get oxygen, to where now when they're in areas where it's easier to get oxygen, it's actually a lot easier for them to.
That's not a good argument.
Actually,
that would be true.
That's distance. Sorry, that's distance.
That's not a good argument because that would suggest that Mongolians should be just as good at distance, or people from the
Mongolians are shorter.
the mountains. Okay, so that would be part of the reason, right? There are
That'd be part
multiple
of it.
factors going on.
Yeah,
Sure. So the point is
but
there's
white
multiple
people are
factors
taller
going
than
on.
black people on average. So
Okay. So there's multiple factors going on.
we're talking about the difference between white people and black people right now.
No, we're talking about the difference between people from the Horn of Africa and people not from the Horn of Africa, which is different than talking about black people writ large, right? Now, it does happen that the people who we're talking about are not all, but actually, yes, just about universally, are black. And that they seem to have an advantage over people who look like you or look like me and have had the same biological background that you and I have had, right? And so similarly, like when we talk about blackness writ large, right? That is a ill-designed way of getting to the conversation, which is to talk about people from the Horn of Africa versus people who are not from the Horn of Africa. So when we're talking about the advantages of sports,
we're talking about in a national competition.
No, we're just talking about in competition writ large. There is just
can't because the points and the reasons for these are different.
I mean the reasons for this are different. What do you mean?
The reasons for these competitions are different if we're talking about a national competition versus a worldwide competition. Like what you're talking about is like one of the points in the worldwide competition.
So in the worldwide competition, should we have a black league and a white league?
In a worldwide competition?
Yeah.
No.
Why not? I agree, to clarify, but why not?
I don't understand the point. Why would we?
Well, we have a women's league and we have a men's league, right? Why shouldn't we have a black league and a white league? What's wrong with having that be a distinction?
Well, again, it's not just being black that makes you faster. But
it's not just being a man that makes you faster.
Well, no, it is.
No, it's testosterone. It's a bunch of advantages.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
The reason
we consider that part of being a man.
Okay, so when we break down the reasons that people from the Horn of Africa have advantages, it has to do with them being faster. That's biological.
Well,
it has to do with something to do with their race. It has something to do. We're talking about people from the Horn of Africa. We're talking about the best athletes at running.
Yes.
At small distance running.
Yes.
Right. So we're talking about people who have a biological advantage in that particular sporting field because of something to do with their racial breakdown, something to do with their makeup at a biological level, not to do with their sex, because this is true both among women and also among men, but rather to do with their race, right?
But the women are not going to be able to compete. Even the women from the Horn of Africa are not going to be able to beat the men who aren't from
of Africa. Sure, that's true. But the women who are from the Horn of Africa can beat the women who are not from the Horn of Africa. And similarly, the men of Horn of Africa can beat the men who are not from the Horn of Africa. Right? So the point is not to compare. So like, if you want to make the point that the women versus men card is still a large distinction, you're right. But the distinction between, Horn of Africa versus not Horn of Africa is also quite clearly an important distinction that does have a large effect on the outcome of people's ability to perform in the sport.
I don't think that the difference is going to be nearly as big as the difference between men and women.
Well, just look at the fastest people. The fastest people are almost universally, like, it doesn't have to be an equivalent degree. You can be right that the difference in terms of the fastest white performer as a man versus the fastest black performer as a man is probably a fraction of a second, whereas the difference between the fastest either black or white male performer versus female performer is a more pronounced distinction. So the point that Sinthe is trying to make is that either one of these is a distinction that is a notable and quantifiable distinction, and yet we don't have a distinction between the leagues between men and women, between blacks and whites.
It's not though. So when we're talking about like the fastest men, sometimes it's a freaking American like Michael Johnson. Sometimes it's a Jamaican like Usain Bolt. Sometimes it's somebody from Africa. Like most of the time, it's going to be somebody from Africa, but not all the time. But if we're talking about a man competing against a woman, both the tops of their leagues, the men will win 100% of the time. 100% of the time, every time. The difference between the two is immeasurable. Like it's not immeasurable. It's so much bigger.
It is measurable.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It is measurable, but it's the difference is so much bigger between men and women than it is from person from one country to another.
Okay, so let's say that instead we had a league of short versus tall basketball players. I think you could probably fairly say that you could almost certainly across the board the best basketball players who are above 6 foot tall versus the best basketball players teams. If you make a team of 5-on-5 of a team of they're below 5 foot and a team of they're above 6 foot, and you get the best of both of those groups, I think it's fair to say universally the 6 foot plus are going to beat the 5 foot minus, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Okay, you have two leagues. You have two teams of basketball players. One is the best of the best of 6 foot plus tall players of basketball, and the other is the best of the best 5 foot or less tall basketball players. Is it fair to say that across the board, every single time, no matter how many times you try to iterate this, that it will always be the case that the 6 foot plus tall basketball team will always beat the 5 foot less or minus, whatever you want to call it, basketball team? Is that fair?
Yes. Okay,
I agree with you. Does that mean that we should have a 5 foot less league for basketball?
No.
Why not?
Because again, the broadness of what you're talking about doesn't affect nearly as many people. There's not going to be.
I think there's a lot of short basketball players.
I don't think there's going to be enough basketball players who are under 5 foot for this to actually make a difference. Now, can you go make a separate league for these people? Sure. That there likely already is one, but well, yeah.
The point is that So the point is that like in something like football, we don't do this. But in something like the UFC, we do this. We do have featherweights. We do have different weight class within the UFC. And there are people who are, Conor McGregor would not be able to, even though he's one of the biggest, best, most famous fighters in the world, would not be able to go one-on-one against a heavyweight champion because he's simply not big enough to be able to fight them. And yet it's still interesting, yet it's still worthwhile to watch him play the sport at the highest level that is possible at his size, which is different than the highest level writ large, right?
Right.
And so the question is like, why are we defining our sports in that context, in that way, in relation to the UFC, but not doing that in relation to basketball? What do we see as the reason that we should have a small people's UFC that's still taken seriously, but we don't have a small people's NBA that's taken seriously?
So in the UFC, the skill level can be the same across all classes, while
being tall is not a skill.
The skill level can be the same across all levels, while just the size of the person and the weight can make a huge difference in how easy it is for the other person to compete.
True basketball.
And so, well, you compared it to football, so I'm talking about football right now. So,
okay, it's also true of football. Sure. And I don't think that there's any situation where I could be a linebacker just because of my body type. Then I could go against someone who, no matter how well I was trained, I couldn't be a linebacker, right?
In football, there are different positions that have different requirements. So if you're talking about like a lineman, sure,
Tom, that's such a bad argument.
Will you shut up for just 2 seconds?
Okay, sorry,
I cannot get through a freaking sentence.
I'm sorry. Go for it.
Okay. In football, there are different requirements for literally every position. So like a fullback is normally around like 5'5". Even running backs are normally somewhere around like 5'8" to 6 foot. Like these are not really tall people who are running backs because they need to be small, agile, they need to be able to fit in the pockets between linemen, which is why you make linemen really big, tall, towery types of guys who can push people around and make it it hard for somebody to get down low where the running back is. Now, with wide receivers, every team has pocket receivers, which are going to be small, and they have big, tall wide receivers who are going to be able to jump high and grab stuff. Like the requirements for even linebackers a lot of times are short. What their entire position is just based on how well they can tackle somebody, and so a lot of that is going to be based on body type, but those body types are based on how much they work out and how fast that they can run to catch somebody. Like football has such a wide array of body types necessary for the positions that they need. Even cornerbacks are like really short people. Cornerbacks on average are probably around 5'8" as well. Like, these are short freaking people. If all of a sudden you make a short league for this, well, it's going to be completely different. Like the way that this league works, where everybody is short, instead of having some short people for some positions and some tall people for some positions, it would just be a whole new sport altogether.
Yeah, I agree with you. It'd be a different sport. It would similarly be a different sport if the UFC was just, any two different people that they can possibly find smash against each other. Whoever smashes better is the better smasher, and that's it.
But this
and
is
there was no weight
1v1
classes.
sport. It's a 1v1 sport.
Okay. So then let's not use the football example. Let's use the basketball example. Should there be this league of short basketball players? Because even if you're talking about the point guard, you still don't want a 4 foot tall point guard, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So should there be a 4 foot tall basketball team in the same way that there are, 100-pound or whatever it is, UFC fighters? And if not, why not?
Yeah, again, if we're talking about creating like separate leagues for people to have the ability to compete, yeah, for sure.
Okay, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about it as like entertainment.
Well,
we're
no,
talking
that's
about
what a women's league is. It's a separate league so that women have the ability to compete.
No, it's not about like doing this out of. If you're talking about like college, maybe. But if you're talking about like actual like WNBA,
yeah, I'm talking about
WNBA.
WNBA.
To make money. Yeah, that's to make money. This is a for-profit organization. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because they're trying to make money. They're doing it because they think that is going to be an entertaining thing. Turns out that it isn't. The WNBA is doing terribly.
Yeah,
they're not
that's
doing
what I
well
was about
financially.
to say. That's not a business decision because they're not doing well. They literally have to take donations just to stay up.
Just because they're doing poorly doesn't mean that it's not a business decision. It just means they suck at business.
Well, no.
Right?
Hold on. No. Hold on. Stop. Whether the league being created was just so that women could compete. Eventually, it became something that could be monetized to where different networks wanted to try to televise some of the games. But in the beginning, yes, it was created just so that women had the ability to compete.
You're wrong.
No,
That's
I'm
not why the WNBA. You're literally wrong about the history of the WNBA.
No.
WNBA was made as a for-profit company.
I'm
You're
not
just
arguing
incorrect.
over whether or not it was made for profit. I'm saying that the reason it was made. Okay, let me ask you: if they had the option to make a men's basketball league or a women's basketball league, which one of them would have been more profitable?
They did both.
Which
they
one?
started
No. You as an individual. No, shut up. You as an individual.
They started
you
both.
as an individual.
They're the same company as the NBA.
It doesn't matter. Yes, but they didn't start them both at the same time. They started
because they thought the men's was going to be more profitable.
It's not the men's. No, it's not the men's. It's just the National Basketball Association. It's not the men's league. It is just a league for the best people. When the women could not make the best league, they created a separate league for them. There is not a men's league.
Okay. So then when we talk about the featherweights, that's just the league for people who aren't able to be heavyweights.
Dynamic. No, that is a
Why is it a different dynamic?
Because
are you saying that Conor
different
McGregor
sport.
could fight someone who's 600 pounds? Of course he couldn't.
No, exactly. I'm saying it's a different sport. It's completely
so
different. The reason
the
for the
women's league
categories is
different
completely
sport too.
different reasoning.
The point is that there is no way that someone who is 200 pounds, no matter how talented, could beat up someone who's 450 pounds. It's just not possible. At the highest level, 450, you are simply stronger. You are simply able to take more punches than a 200-pound person. Yes. That is true across the board.
They categorize right? those sports based on how fair they think they can be.
Awesome. Okay, so it's not fair that someone who's 4 foot can never succeed at the WNBA or at the NBA. It's not fair, right? And yet it is true that no one who's 4 foot tall is ever going to succeed in either of those leagues. It is also true that no one who is a Jew like me or whatever it might be is going to be able to succeed at the highest level of short distance running, right? I will never be able to do it. And that doesn't mean that it's a bad league. It just means that it is not a league that is built in such a way that it is going to include people who are like me. That doesn't make it bad.
I'm sorry, you're making absolutely no sense. You're comparing things that no. Stop. You are comparing things that are not comparable. Okay, the UFC having weight classes is about them having fairness between competitors. Having the WNBA is just about affirmative action because women are never actually making the league with the men. So they made the women's league so that they could have a league where women actually had the ability to play in a professional sport.
That's my point.
No,
the 4 foot tall guy will never be able to make it either in the WNBA, which he's excluded from, or in the NBA, which he's not literally excluded from, but will never be able to make it to because he's 4 foot tall. No. It is true.
No, that's
it is true.
No,
how many 4 foot tall people are in the NBA right now?
No, they could make the WNBA.
The 4 foot tall man?
100%.
No, he can't. He's excluded from it.
Well, I'm saying if we were talking about
he might have the talent for it.
Yes,
I agree with you. He might have the talent for it, but he's excluded from it.
Exactly.
So why is it okay? So then why don't we have a group of why don't we have the NBA 5 foot plus and the NBA 5 foot minus rather than having the NBA and the WNBA? Why is it that we're excluding people based on the fact that they are not a woman rather than excluding people based on the fact that they're too tall? Because clearly both being a man and also being tall are advantages in basketball.
They can create those for affirmative action reasons. They can.
It's not affirmative action reasons. It's so that it's an interesting sport to watch.
No.
That's the reason you build any reason for all of these sports.
Exactly. And the guys who can't dunk, the guys who can't even touch the backboard are not going to be nearly as entertaining. Now, if we're talking about
have you watched the WNBA? Of course you haven't, because it's incredibly boring.
No, I have. I'm a huge fan of the Spirits, but I literally go to Spirit games.
It's so boring.
But
it's so boring.
They win championships, so it is. Compared to the men's, it is. It's
not
horrible.
As good as the men's.
And this is my point: is we categorize these things based on what is fair and what's going to get viewership, and we allow the best of the best to go and compete in those areas. I don't understand where you're going with this.
So the point is that if you're talking about a women's league, you are not talking about the best of the best. If you're talking about
it's affirmative action, of course.
Okay, Tom. So then similarly, it's affirmative action to have the smaller people group league within the UFC, right?
That's don't also disagree with this. Action. I'm saying you can create. I keep saying you can create affirmative action leagues for these people to have the ability to compete. That's fine.
So Sinthe's point was therefore, if all of these leagues, whether we're talking about women's leagues or we're talking about weight requirement leagues or we're talking about height requirement leagues, if all of this is universally a form of affirmative action as you're describing it, why would we not create an affirmative action that is inclusive of trans people? That's his point.
No, it's not. No, because
it is his point.
No, it's not. No, because if you were it's not. You are totally wrong. If that's what he was fucking saying. If that was his point, we would be creating a trans league An affirmative
No,
action trans
no,
league.
wrong.
Yes, no,
What are
that
you talking
would be his
about?
point, and it's not his point. That's not what he's saying at all. He's saying the trans
No.
people should compete with the women just the same. That's what he's saying.
No. He's to say that you don't believe in the way that the leagues are structured currently doesn't mean that you want to keep the leagues that exist currently and add an additional league. He's saying change the existing leagues and make them act in according to this different viewpoint, right? He's doing the equivalent of saying that we should have height requirements. Fuck the NBA, fuck the WNBA. Let's just have a height requirement league where you have to be over this height or below this height, and there is no more WNBA, and the NBA, you can't be below 4 foot.
And why
right?
would we
That's
do
what
that?
he's saying.
Why would we do that?
Well, he doesn't actually want to do that. That's the equivalent of what he's saying. The equivalent is he's saying we should have leagues for trans women and cis women and for trans men and cis men, right? Rather than exclusively cis, both of those, and trans people get fucked.
If that's
right?
the equivalent of what he's saying,
that's the
then
equivalent.
that's what he wants.
He's shifting those. Yes, he's shifting those. And so the question is, like, why is he wrong for arguing that?
Right? Why would we want to do that? I don't even understand why we would want to do that at all.
Why do we want to do it the way that's structured currently?
I've already explained it. Because that's what's fair. That's what's going to be competitive.
What is fair? What are you talking about? It's not fair that 4 foot people are never going to be able to fucking play basketball.
It is fair.
That's not fair.
It is fair.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is it talent that I'm 6'1" and other people are 4'2"?
No, it's not just
Am I more
based on
talented
talent.
because of that? Okay, so if it's not talent, I am still better at basketball as someone who is equally talented as I am, has put an equally amount, just as good as dribbling, just as good as shooting, as someone who is 4'2". I'm better at basketball than them, and it's not because I've put in more effort. It's not because I have more talent than them.
About?
It's because I'm taller.
No.
The point is that I have an undergirding, biological advantage in basketball comparative to short people.
But
right?
No, because it's not that simple. There are people who are 5'8" who are in the NBA.
And there are women who could beat me in basketball. Of course. That doesn't mean that there aren't advantages that I experience as being male, and that doesn't mean there aren't advantages that I experience as being tall in relation to basketball.
Okay,
these are both obviously true.
That you just made was that
I experience advantages in both of those cases, and yet there are people, because there is a broader skew of there's an arc of people who exist on a spectrum, right? And the spectrum of tall people are over here as a loop-de-loop, right? In the quality of basketball, and I'm somewhere in the middle here-ish, right? Because I'm not that good at basketball. And then there's some people who are really short but can still beat me because they're way over here really good at basketball for someone of their height. And there are women who are way over here in their quality as a woman and can still beat me even though I'm a man, right?
Okay.
Doesn't mean that there aren't advantages to being tall and being a man.
It seems like you're changing your argument every time I make an argument against you. So
I'm not. How is that a change of the argument?
Okay, let's lay this out. So my argument is these are categorized the way that they are categorized based on what is going to be fair for the people who are competing and what will be entertaining to where people will actually want to watch this. What is your argument against this? I'm not hearing anything.
Okay. When you say fair, you are lying.
No.
Fairness does... Okay, Tom, I let you lay it out. I'm going to lay out my...
Hold on.
I'm going to lay out my shit.
Because that's a different argument. It has nothing to do with what I'm saying.
Let me lay out my shit.
I don't care about...
Let me lay out my shit. Let me lay out my shit. Why won't you let me lay out my shit?
Because I don't care about any
of
that
my
stuff.
Here's my claim.
I'm
trying to explain what my view is.
No, because
you can't argue against my view until you understand it, which clearly you don't.
Because you're skipping other parts of my argument in order to make that one. This is a new argument again.
I'm trying to lay out my shit. This is not a new argument. This is the argument I've been making the whole time.
Okay, then make
this is not a new argument.
Affirmative action league for them, and then that's it.
No, Tom, let me fucking shit. You're making me very frustrated. Here's my view. Okay. There is no such thing as fairness in sports. It is a lie. It is a fallacy, okay? It is never going to be true that if you put in the same amount of work, put the same amount of effort, that someone with shorter legs will be able to compete in terms of running while moving their legs as many times against someone with longer legs. That is just a truth about an undergirding truth about the sport. It is similarly true that someone who is just as good at shooting, just as good at dribbling, who is shorter, will not have the advantages that a taller person has in basketball. That is just a truth. It is true that women have a disadvantage comparative to men. It is true that, all of this stuff, right? There's lots of different things that you can think about, and all of these are true. Stronger versus weaker, blah, 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 blah. Okay. If you want to quantify for every single one of those categorizations, the result is that you will have a league of one. You'll have an infinite number of leagues of one person in each of those leagues, because you cannot quantify every single one of those things without quantifying a way into all of these disparate categorizations. You don't want to do that. You want to have a manageable number of leagues. That is what we've done in the UFC in a very specific way that is different than the way that we've done it in terms of historically, in terms of baseball or basketball, which is to say that we had black leagues and white leagues, which is different than historically we've done on a whole host of other issues. That doesn't mean, however, that we are correct and that what we have currently must be stagnant for all time. Now, to be clear, I disagree with Sinthe when Sinthe says that our structuring of women's leagues and men's leagues is a problem writ large, and that should be broken down in the same way that racialized leagues had to be broken down. But that is what he's saying, and it's frustrating that neither you nor Destiny are grappling with what he said.
Okay, so the grappling with what he said, with breaking down those leagues in the first place, was already addressed by saying that women would cease to be able to compete in these leagues. If we started just categorizing them by weight and height, it would be all men in these leagues. And women...
Yeah, like the NBA is like 90% black. Who cares? That's fine.
Well, the entire reason the WNBA was created was so that women could compete. But
Since's point is that would be okay. White people no longer compete at the highest level of short distance running. And Sinthe's response is Gucci, right? He's okay with that.
I disagree with that, but even if that was true...
No, that is true. There are not white people who are winning against Usain Bolt. It's not true. There are no white people who beat Usain Bolt. So it is true that a disproportionate amount of success is experienced by a specific regional group of black people from the Horn of Africa who are derived from the Horn of Africa, who might not live there currently, but who are derived biologically from a particular region of the world and a particular culture and a particular genetic background that gives them predetermined advantages that they were afforded through birth, right? And he's okay with that, and you're okay with it, and I'm okay with it. But for some reason, you and I aren't okay with the advantages afforded to men, afforded to cis men, and afforded to trans women over cis women and trans men. We're not okay with that in the same way. And he's asking why aren't we okay with it?
No.
Now, I don't have a good answer. And I don't think you have a good answer either.
Yeah, again, I don't care if the WNBA ceases to exist. But the point in the WNBA existing is so that biological females can compete without having to get dominated by biological males. So, I don't care if the WNBA ceases to exist. Not something that I care about, but women would care about it. And
white people cared a lot when the NFL was forced to be integrated.
The NBA.
No, the NFL. When the NFL was integrated, there was a lot of conversation about how violent the black leagues were, and how this was going to be the downfall of the Yale game. It was going to be the downfall of the gentleman's agreement that was football, and this is going to destroy the sport for white people. And this is something that can very much be was recorded as a very important part of the history of the sport, right? It doesn't mean that the white people who were trying to protect white sports were correct.
Yeah, I that's
And yet it is true. What their concern was is right.
again.
It is a more violent sport now than when
Again,
it was the Yale Club.
the
It is a sport that has very few white people at the highest level other than as quarterback. It is a sport that is like many of their criticisms, many of their concerns turned out to be valid. And yet we broadly believe that an integrated league at a racialized level is still a good thing, even if the criticisms that were pushed back against it were criticisms that turned out to be valid from the vantage point that the people making those claims were bringing forward those claims.
Okay, we've already gone over this part, so the difference between a black and a white man is like not nearly as big as the difference between a man and a woman. So,
Tom, that's such a bad argument.
It's
the
not.
difference between a man who is 250 pounds versus a man who's 225 pounds is not as substantial as the difference between a man who is 250 and a woman who is 250, or so like, yeah, that's true, and yet it's also true that the UFC does still break down between weight classes.
Again, I've already explained the difference between the UFC and everybody else. You're not engaging with that. You're just moving past it and then coming back to it again later, just as you're doing with almost all of my arguments. Is you're moving past them and then coming back to them later.
Tom, I'm using different ways that categorizations have been done in the past.
Yes, but when I respond to it, you have to tell me why I'm wrong. You can't just move on to something else and then come back to that same argument later.
Tom, I'm not arguing that you're wrong. I'm arguing that you're coming from a particular perspective that is not based in fairness. Right?
And I'm arguing that I am. I just don't care about those specific types of categorizations when we're talking about fairness. Those don't matter as much if we're talking about fairness.
Okay, so if you're the one who is making a claim towards fairness, and I am the one who is simply making the claim that there exists no fairness in sports, you are the one who has the burden of proof that lies with you. It doesn't lie with me.
Hold on. Okay, so I don't really care about fairness in sports. I'm saying that
I agree, to clarify.
In the UFC, it makes sense to categorize those things in those ways because for competitive reasons. Because it actually is.
What do you mean by competitive reasons? What does that mean?
So if all we had were like big heavyweight guys just swinging as hard as they could, that's interesting. That's fun to watch, but we don't get the agility, the defense. We don't get the moving around. We don't get the, the quick jabs. Like we don't get as much of that with just the heavyweights. So there are different parts that are interesting with different weight classes. And we get those different aspects in different weight classes. Obviously,
let me do a defense
the big weight
basketball.
class wouldn't compete very well against the featherweight weight class.
I agree with all of this. Let me do a defense in the relation to basketball now. If we're talking about basketball as it exists in the NBA, it's basically just someone dunks. They grab the other team grabs the ball. They run to the other side. They attempt to dunk. They either succeed in the dunk or they fail in the dunk. It's just a dunking contest. If we had a sports league of basketball that was exclusively people who are 4 foot tall or less, that would be a sports league, or 5 foot tall or less, whatever it is. That would be a sports league that would not have any dunking, or at the very least would have very few dunking, and therefore it would be a sport that would be much more reliant on passing. It would be a sport that's much more reliant on the jump shot, much more reliant on different sects of the sport. And it would therefore be a different vantage point. It would be a different way of looking at the sport. And I think it would be a more interesting and nuanced way of perspective of looking at it in the same way as the UFC. Is that fair?
I don't think so, because we have different positions in the NBA that require normally different sizes of people. Normally the point guard's going to be the smallest, the center's going to be the biggest, and you move on taller and taller throughout these positions. Short people are able to compete in these leagues because in reality, it's not a dunking competition, it's a three-point competition in reality. And the short people are throwing up three-pointers all day, and the tall people are down by the basket getting the rebounds and throwing it back out to the short people to try to shoot another three-pointer. So
I think if we went through a proportion of the shots that are being taken within a league that is people that includes people who are literally 7 foot tall and people who are the majority of them are I assume upwards of 6 foot tall. I don't know the exact statistics on hand, but very very tall people. I think the proportion of shots that are dunks is going to be a much higher proportion of shots that are dunks than if the people were all 5 foot or less. Is that fair?
You're saying taller people have a higher chance of attempting to dunk. Yeah.
Yeah, you agree with this?
Yes.
Okay, so if we had a sports league that was exclusively short people, there would be fewer dunks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I as
but
there's
a
also
fan, fewer
viewer,
dunks from point guards currently.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Sure. So if I as a fan like to watch basketball without the dunks, I should be afforded a league to watch that has fewer dunks. In the same way that if I am a sports fan who enjoys watching people punch each other, but doesn't just enjoy them, slowly marauding around. I am the Hulk, really slowly, but instead doing an interesting sort of like dance around, more technical skill, blah 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 blah. I would want to have a featherweight, right? These are equivalent.
Yeah, I suppose. Again, I think we get all of this in the NBA currently with different positions, but sure. Like in the UFC, where it's only a one-on-one, so it's not a team where you get some of those aspects from different positions, just like you do in the NFL. You get some of those aspects from different positions. You're talking about like making the entire
so the NBA, as it exists today, is not more or less fair than my TBA and SBA, my Tall Basketball Association and Short Basketball Association. And if I had my TBA and my SBA, it would include both women and men, which means exclusively men, right? And that would be fair, just as what we have currently is fair.
I think the NBA is currently fair, yes.
Okay, so it would be fair if I had the if I had a tall BA and a short BA. That would also be fair.
I guess, yeah.
A league that you have to be above 5 foot and a league that you have to be below 5 foot.
Yeah, sure.
That would be fair. Okay, so it's not a matter of fairness. That distinction is not a matter of fairness, just as the UFC distinction is not a matter of fairness. Similarly, it's not a matter of fairness whether or not there's a women's league or there isn't a women's league, right?
Yeah. It's not a matter. The league was created for a matter of fairness, but I don't.
But it's not a matter of fairness.
I'm only watching the NBA for the most part. I don't care about whether or not the WNBA ends up existing.
But you don't believe that. It's not a matter of fairness that there be a women's basketball association, in the same way that it's not a matter of fairness that there be a 5 foot or less association for basketball, right? It's not a matter of fairness. It's a matter of, is this an interesting thing to watch?
Yes, I think it would have to be fair in some ways in order for it to be interesting to watch as well, which is why we have different classes for the UFC.
Wait, what do you mean by it would have to be fair for it to be interesting to watch?
Well, if...
Like, between teams it has to be fair, but it doesn't have to be fair who is and isn't able to play in the game.
Yes, right.
Okay, so it is between teams fair to have a 5 foot less sports league and a 5 foot plus sports league, and it is between teams fair to have neither of those leagues. Simply anyone can play it no matter their height. It is between teams fair to have a women's exclusively league. It is between teams fair to have a men's exclusively league, or to have a league that is inclusive either of men or women, which realistically means exclusively men. Yes? Between teams.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, Sinthe's point is between teams, it's fair to have a women's league exclude trans people. Between teams, that's fair, so long as it's true across all of the teams. And between teams, it's fair if the women's league includes trans women. Yes? Even if every single person who was playing in the game was exclusively a trans woman, there were no cis women in it at all, it would still, between teams, be a valid thing to do. Yes?
I suppose, as a matter of fairness, yes.
Okay, so then his point is the whole idea of this is the fall of, women's sports or whatever. The whole idea of this is going to be like, this spells disaster for blah, 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 blah. Like, his point is, I care about that no more. It's not what I believe, but what he's saying is he doesn't care about that any more than he cares about 4 foot tall basketball players can get fucked and are never going to make it in the NBA. That's his point. And he's right. It's a valid point. It's our job as people who want to defend women's sports to have an argument that defends why we want to see cis women included at the highest level of sports. And by the highest level, I don't mean the highest level of skill necessarily, and I certainly don't mean the highest level of ability to outperform other players. I mean the highest level as in the highest paid level, as in the highest level of viewership, which is a very different categorization. I'm talking about them as entertainers. I'm not talking about them as actual athletes.
Yeah, see, I only care about it as actual athletes. So I'm not just talking about the WNBA. I'm also talking about high school girls. I'm also talking about, recreation teams. I'm talking about all of these men are going to be able to compete against each other because they will always be the best in these areas. And those women will never have those opportunities in any of those areas. I'm not just talking about professional areas where we're only getting the best of the best and the tallest of the tallest and the people from different countries and blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about all of the leagues across the board would most likely recategorize in the same way that these professional leagues recategorize. And most of these controversies are over like high school sports or college sports teams allowing trans people in. And so those are the ones that we're arguing over, saying, well, should those trans people be allowed to compete against these other 12th grade girls or something like that? That's mainly what we're talking about. And all of these women's leagues are only there so that they have a chance to compete. And in those areas, most of the time, most everybody else is going to have the ability to compete in some way, in some area, in a recreation league, in a high school league, in some way, somewhere. Yes, they will all have the ability to compete within those leagues. But trans people then going in and competing with those other women would make that league pointless to exist anymore because it's just now another male league.
Well, it's not a male league. It's a trans women's league. But yes, it would be
a male league, yeah, but not a men's league, yeah, because they would still be biological males, yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. We disagree about those terms, but that's fine. That's a completely different conversation, which we've had before. Okay, this is valid. This is not something that Destiny said to Sinthe.
Well, so this is actually a pickup of their argument from a panel. So a lot of things were obviously missing when they, at the beginning, seemed to skip over like 100 different arguments and just started somewhere. It's because this argument started on a panel that we watched just a couple of days ago, and then they decided to finish this here today.
Okay. Yeah. I obviously don't. I can't even halfway through this debate. I don't even know fully what they said here, but I certainly didn't watch their panel. Interesting. Yeah, I just think that this is like I think that Sinthe is making a better argument here than I've heard from someone who disagrees. To be clear, like a lot of the chat seems to be under the impression that I agree with Sinthe, which I definitely don't. I think that like broadly that Destiny is right on the actual merits of this case. I just think that he's arguing it very poorly at this point in the debate. But anyway, yeah.
I don't think he is. I think Sinthe's arguments are ridiculous. Like, he's not even making sense. He's skipping all over the place.
I think that he is making a bad point well, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I think that he is out arguing Destiny, even if he's wrong on the merits of the case.
I don't agree with that. Like the entire time I've been listening to this, every time Sinthe speaks, it's me just like, what? How is that even a response to what Destiny said? Like, how are you even like? It just seems like he's in a different debate the entire time.
Tom, you frustrate me. You're like, you're a smart enough man that it frustrates me that you fall into the same trappings as many people online, which is to just think that the person who agrees with you is the one who's winning the debate all of the time, regardless of whether or not they're actually like the merits of what they're saying rather than what they're believing are valid.
So I actually review debates. Like that's probably what I do more often than anything else on here.
I know,
I
that's why it's
commonly
frustrating.
believe that the people who disagree with me are arguing it better than the other person. So that's not a good argument based on history at all.
Tom,
I
you're
think
frustrating.
that you have trouble with debates, and I think that I think that Sinthe also has trouble with debates, where there are a lot of pieces that are missing in what it is that they need to convey in order to make the points that they're making. And sometimes I feel like you guys are already proven wrong, and you still keep wiggling and squirming and making points against things that we're not even saying after a while, just to try to like win the argument. And yeah.
Wait, Tom. Of course, that's exact. Yes, in the context of this conversation, of course.
No,
I came
not in
into
this conversation. I'm thinking of in conversations with you in general, which is why I commonly get really pissed off every time we talk, is because I feel like I've already won the debate and you're still arguing crazy stuff anyways. So yeah, I'm not. I've talked to Sinthe a number of times as well, and it's the same thing with him, where like he'll keep arguing things that make absolutely no sense, and I just kind of stop talking to him because you just I don't it's so frustrating.
Yeah, Quibbles is very good at filling in gaps on people's arguments that they haven't actually made. No, Chase, he did make these arguments. He's just like not making them like here's the way I describe it. Destiny is making bad arguments for the correct view. Well, so like
you're
he's
framing
saying
this completely differently than everybody else, though, because this isn't actually how the arguments are framed at all. It's, should women's sports exist, and if so, why? Sinthe is saying, well, we should just split it up, and if women end up not being able to compete anymore, that's fine. And Destiny's saying, well, the entire reason women's sports were created in the first place was so that women could compete. So that seems to be like a necessary component for them to exist.
Wait, repeat that again. I'm sorry.
Normally we would only have one league, which is like just the best people come compete.
Yeah.
But if every time all it ends up being is just men, then he feels it's necessary to then make one for women where they actually have a chance at competing. Like,
well, now we're just going back to the same part that we were going for prior, right? This is the same point.
Because you keep taking it to fairness. And nobody's talking about fairness. We're talking about whether or not they have the ability to compete.
So Synthe's point is, I agree that women would not be able to compete in the same way that he agrees that white people are not able to compete in the context of running, and that short people are not able to compete in the context of basketball, or people with short legs aren't able to compete in the context of running.
Yes, and
right?
again,
and
we would say that you just create a separate league for them. Just as we did for women.
But we don't say that universally because short people don't have their own basketball league, and there's no real group of people who are trying to make one for them.
I would bet you money there is one.
There's not. There's not an equivalent to like the UFC breakdown by weight class for basketball by height class. It's not true.
Yeah, the little person's basketball league. Well, no, again, we're not breaking them all down by class. We're not breaking them all down by sex either. Women can compete in the NBA. They've said this numerous times. If there were ever women who were able to compete or tried out and actually passed, they would be competing in the NBA. Same in the NFL. That's not a men's league.
All right, KOE Nation is getting very frustrated that I won't read his comments out loud, so I'm going to read his comments out loud. So you are reading the comment. No wonder you don't address my comments. Open weight MMA fights happen all the time in Japan, and the smaller guys often wins. Wonder why you'd ignore it. Laughy emoji, crying emoji. The emoji happened twice.
That's actually true. But
yeah, sure. That doesn't address the issue, right? Like that there are individual moments where people who are shorter manage to win doesn't mean anything, right? There are individual points. Like there are games within tennis wherein there are men and women on both sides, and there's a man and a woman on one side, and there's a man and a woman on the other side, and an individual point, the woman can get an individual point on the individual man within those games. Doesn't mean that writ large, tennis is fair, men versus women, right? It means that on that individual point, there was an upset. And on that individual point, there was a moment where a man failed against a woman and a woman succeeded against a man, right? Which, good for her and bad for him, right? But that doesn't mean that it's fair between men and women. And it similarly doesn't mean that just because there's a one-off game, a one-off fight wherein a smaller man managed to beat a bigger man, that therefore it's fair between weight class. It's not true. You're wrong, Phil. I love you, but you're fucking wrong. Yeah. All right, I grow tired of steel manning my enemies. So I'm going to let you continue to watch your debate. But I adore you.
All right, later, dude.
All right, see ya.